Ladies first.
Sure, I'll go ahead. Hi, Shannon Knight. Graduated from Center in 2008, and I am a partner at Chapman Spangola. It's a boutique business law firm in Chicago.
Thanks, Shannon. I'll go next then. My name is Andrea Longton. I graduated in 2009. I'm SVP Financial Services at Opportunity Finance Network. It is a trade association to promote social justice investing in the U.S.
All right, I am Roy Lee Wigginton. I graduated in 2008 as well, and I am the marketing and events manager at Maker's Mark Distillery.
Awesome. I'm Derek Tingle. I graduated in 2008, currently key accounts manager for CenterPoint Energy Services. We supply natural gas to any institution, entity, or large industrial end user of natural gas. Cooler version of that is energy sales, so I'll just stick with that.
Well, thank you for those introductions. And I think those are all the alums we have on here today. But if you guys want to go ahead and get started, whoever would like to speak first, and kind of, I guess we can start off with what were you feeling whenever you were graduating and knowing we were in a recession? What were you kind of, what was your plans? How were you kind of going about your job search? You guys have any thoughts on that? We can start off with that.
I'd be happy
to order. Yeah, and Shannon.
Yeah, I'll start. So I was mostly oblivious, I think, whenever we first graduated, and that was because I knew I was going to law school, and I think I thought, oh, you know, the recession, I won't graduate for 3 more years, I'll be fine. Like by then things will be turned around, and that was not quite what happened. You know, so at the time, I think unlike a lot of my classmates who were trying to figure out like, where do I find jobs now that the market is shrinking, I was just focused on the next step. But I did eventually have to go through those same steps just a year later, whenever I was the end of my first year after law school, trying to find positions. And what I learned then, which if any of the students are going on to professional school right away will probably similarly experience, is that because the market had shrunk so much in that year, jobs that might have typically been available for first-year law students just weren't there anymore. Or if they were, we were now competing against people who were a year or two our senior and obviously much more experienced. And people would rather have those students than, you know, a lowly first-year law student. And so certainly, you know, there was a lot of stress and concern, and I would say really just desperation for getting anything, any position, any experience that we could get our hands on. You know, I was no different than any of my other classmates at that point. And it really was, you know, the beggars can't be choosers at that point. We were just trying to get in and get meaningful experience. And eventually I did, and, you know, continued that on throughout law school. And that was how my path led to where I'm at now. And I can talk more about that later, but generally that was kind of how 2008 impacted me.
I echo a lot of what Shannon said, especially around you just gotta hustle and find any job that you can, and know that it's a really tight market, and it'll be even tighter for this recession than the one that we faced. But to hustle and get whatever job you can. Hopefully it's in the same vein of what you want, but if not, make it work and learn how to sell it to get in the vein that you want to be in. So similarly to Shannon, I went straight to grad school from undergrad, but I had luckily come up with, I was a year behind, so I was in 2009, so I could kind of see it coming from friends who graduated in 2008 and came up with, you know, game plan A, B, C, and ended up with game plan C for what I wanted to do. And so I went and got a master's degree in international trade development with a concentration in economic development. And I say that because I ended up relying on that concentration to get domestic work, because I'm not working in international development, I'm working in domestic development. And while I'm very happy with that, it wasn't the plan. But you got to find a job and build from there. And so for me, it was, went to DC and found internships. A lot of people were just going to school, but find an internship that can lead into a job. And then take that job and jump into what you want to be doing based on the experience that you got in that job. So I started off as a financial analyst in a consulting shop, arranging financing for development projects in emerging markets, and then found work at a community development financial institution, which is a development institution, a development finance shop based in the US, and then jumped from there to Freddie Mac, to where I am now, which is finally doing what I want to be doing. So it took 10 years, but it's also, you have to keep I kept a strategy of, this is where I want to go. This is what I want to be doing when I get there. And how do I take the leaps to get to where I want to be?
Yeah, for me, I actually ended up working at Center for 2 years after graduation. So a little bit of prolonging the inevitable. It was something in a sense of what I wanted to do. I took a role there in student activities on campus. And so that provided me some insight and career development and experience of what I kind of long-term wanted to do. But then about 2 years, after those 2 years was up with the fellowship, was faced with the same thing. So I ended up taking a job with an events company that was based in Charlotte, North Carolina, and it was very much the set up and tear down for big conferences at a hotel. It was not at all what I wanted. Didn't get really to utilize much of the creative side of who I am, but I needed a job. I needed the paycheck. So, uprooted from being here in Kentucky, moved to Charlotte, was there and could get through that about a year before I I kept looking the entire time, especially as it kind of went on, and it just didn't provide the fulfillment that you wanted, but again, needed the paycheck. And then an opportunity came, and it was with Makers. It was not in the role that I am now, or even maybe exactly what I wanted. But it was a way in the door and a way to kind of come back home and hopefully start to grow that career in the direction that you want it to. And then it's a lot of kind of it's kind of Andrew was saying, you've got to kind of take those steps to make your path. It may not be traditional. You're leapfrogging here and there, which, maybe graduates in a different time, different era have been able to just take that straight path from A to Z, where we kind of had to figure it out on a different trajectory, if you will.
Awesome. Thanks, Roylee. My story is a little bit different. I mean, I had several offers for $500,000 and $600,000 jobs pretty much right out of the gate. So, no, kidding. It was definitely a process for me too. I'd actually lined up a job as a financial advisor in Danville through playing on the golf team, and that was what I was going to do. And 3 to 4 months in, I was 22, try to advise people what to do with their money that had been working longer than I've been alive. So I just couldn't tie that out. So I ended up moving back to Louisville with my parents, and I went back to a place that I worked in high school, busting tables, Bonefish Grill, and I was serving tables for 4 to 5 months just to keep money coming in until I could figure out something to do. And I actually, during that time, I was all over career services and just like trying to use their network to figure out whatever I could do. I had no idea. And a fraternity brother of mine actually, and then a good friend of mine was working at an energy consulting shop. And he was like, man, come check it out. Interviewed and got the job. Didn't really know anything about energy, but like my fellow alums, just had to do something to get into that corporate world to be able to get that experience. And so I was there for 2 years, and then the company that I now work for, I was managing a customer, and they're like, hey, have you ever thought about maybe coming on the supply side of things rather than the consulting end? And I said no. And actually April 25th of this month, I've marked 9 years with the company. So our senior vice president has a great saying, and he says, life is about managing expectations. And my main takeaway would be that, I felt good when I was coming out of college because I had a plan, and I was very envious of people that had that just, whatever, med school, law school, like Shannon. I was really, and I thought I was there, but then my expectations would change when my plan kind of changed. So I guess if I had to offer my one piece of advice, it would just be expect it to be a grind. And when it is a grind, you won't be surprised. And if it ends up not being a grind, then you'll feel all the better. But it's just, that was kind of my path. Had no clue, but here I am about 10 years later, happily married in Franklin, Tennessee. And if I didn't take that one job that I knew anything about, I could make the case that I probably wouldn't be down here right now. But so yeah, that's my story.
Well, I guess my question, I guess for everybody, I don't know if we have seniors, if it's all seniors or if we have like a mix of juniors. What would you all suggest, especially as working professionals now, what would you suggest their next steps should be for seniors or just juniors kind of trying to plan for their own senior year and kind of approach job searching or graduate school searching?
You want to stick with the order, Shannon, or just kinda,
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a little hard for me because I was, on a different path heading out. I would say for anyone who's heading into professional school, start getting, especially for seniors who are graduating soon and will be starting hopefully new programs, start planning now. Start thinking, a lot of programs you're not allowed or it's not advised to have jobs during your first year while you're acclimating into a new program. But start trying to lay any and capitalize on any relationships you have. If you're staying local and you know someone in your market or someone that you'd like to, even if you're not going to be ready for a job tomorrow, even if it's a year from now, start asking them, small ways that you can, keep making touches and contacts with them to stay on their radar. Ask for advice, ask for, even just to, well, right now, a cup of coffee isn't something you can really do. But, even if it's just, chatting for 5 minutes, try to keep those connections or build connections, because that person might be able to put you in contact with the next person, and the next person after that might know someone who then eventually has a position for you or a lead on a position. You never know where that will come from. So start working now just to build up your own network as much as possible. And, for the most part, I think professionals and people are willing to use their time to help young people to try to get out there and to learn more and to make connections. And just try to be thoughtful and respectful, of course, of any time that you're asking for people to give. Sorry, I don't know if that feedback is me or... Sorry, I'm just gonna.
All right. Sorry, I just disconnected my headphones, hoping that might fix that. But just try as much as you can, to find ways to get small, meaningful touches with people. Whenever I have people who reach out to me and want to grab a cup of coffee or have a call, I'm always willing to do it, but the people that I'm more willing to go back to again are the ones who want to talk for 10 minutes, not the person who tries to go out for an hour-long lunch. So lots of tips in there, hopefully. But those would be now as I'm helping to mentor young students up here, and those are some of the practices that I would recommend.
That's great, Shannon. I echo what you're saying too, and start to reach out to your network. And when I was just coming out of center, that was really intimidating for me. It was really scary to reach out to people and to do it and to do something that is outside of your comfort zone. So for me, that was reaching out to someone and doing exactly what Shannon suggests, which is a really good thing to do, which is to say, hey, my name's Andrea Longton. I'm really interested in your industry. I just graduated from college and would love to have 5 minutes of your time just to introduce myself and to have an informational interview. The word informational interview is your best friend because it puts all the pressure off of both people saying, can I have the interview? And the person saying, the person accepting the interview. Because then it's not about a job, it's about making a connection. And it was intimidating for me, so I imagine it will be intimidating for some of you. Do it anyway, and reach out to all of your network, because you might reach out to 100 people. This is the extreme. You might only hear back from 10% of the people that you reach out to. So keep doing it. And if someone says no, say okay, and then reach out to the next person. because you never know where those connections are made. I'm thinking about somebody who graduated, I think, in 2012 from Center, who reached out to one person in the periphery of my field. And where I am, nobody's ever heard of Center College. And so that's one thing that you have to get used to right away is nobody's heard of where you went to school. You can't lean on that at all if you're outside Kentucky or neighboring state. But somebody reached out, someone who graduated reached out to a periphery industry, and all of a sudden it came to my desk and said, hey, this person went to Center. Do you think we should reach out to them for an interview? Yeah, I think you should. So you never really know where it's going to go because people talk even if you don't get the direct feedback. So when reaching out to your networks, also taking a step back and saying, okay, the economy is collapsing right now. Where are the areas that are still standing and where are the areas that are growing? And even if you wanted to get a job in a piece of the economy that looks like it's collapsing right now, recognize that you want to be set up for success and not set up for failure, and go set yourself up for success and go to an industry that's growing right now, and find a job there. And once you have that job on your resume and once you have that office experience, it's so much easier to get the next job and to be able to sell that to go to the next piece. I echo also what Derek said earlier about it's a grind, and you got to know that going in, and you got to hustle and grind, and every piece of work that you do has to be A work. It can't be C work, because if you keep performing the A work, people will see it and people will recognize it. And if it comes to a crunch of who's going to be promoted, who's not, who's going to stay with the company, who's going to be let go, they're going to remember who does the A work and who brings more value.
Can I add one thing on that?
Yeah.
Sorry, Carly. One that my partners and I run our law clerk and our young associates part of our firm. So I'm constantly overseeing and judging who we're going to bring on. And one of the things that we try to always tell our young people is whatever you do in a position once you're there, do everything you can to make the lives of the people that you're reporting to easier, and do everything you can to make you indispensable to them. You want to be the first person that they lean to, not just someone who, gets assignments and does them great, but you want to be the person who always is going above to where you become so attached to whoever the next person to lead you up the chain is that they need to have you in the meetings, or they need you to be giving feedback on things. You might be young and inexperienced, but we all have value in our own experiences and our ideas. And don't forget that you have value too. It might not be, you might not have every answer to give to someone, and you will stumble along the way and say things that probably don't make any sense because you're learning. But just remember that there's always value in ideas, and don't be afraid to speak up and contribute from a very early point once you're in the door.
Yeah, absolutely agree on all that. Using your connections, being able to leverage that whenever, even if you think it's not really a connection, maybe you find that mutual friend or someone that was either a professor or a staff member at Center or a fellow student who maybe they knew that person a little bit better, or they have a connection. You never know where that will come from. We've all had those stories, whether on the kind of student side or the job applicant side, or now from the other side. We started an internship program a couple of years back, and I manage a good bit of that in the hiring on and interviewing process. And I will tell you, if I see a candidate that comes in and they have Center College on the resume, I'm gonna give them an interview because I have that connection and I know the value that comes with it. And to Andrea's point, that's something because I went there and because I'm in Kentucky, I know that. You don't have that luxury everywhere. So when you can kind of leverage that and have that Center connection, don't feel at all guilty to use it. Exploit it, please, because I think that it only benefits everybody. Because I think Center prepares you to be a good person in addition to a good employee. But to Andrea's point, you can like somebody and enjoy working alongside them all you want. When push comes to shove, if they don't make the work life easier and they don't perform to the needs of the business, it may hurt, but you're going to go with the candidate, the person who's going to be best suited for the job and be able to bring the most value to the company. So to echo that, just make yourself indispensable. I kind of built the role that I'm in now from doing that, just raising my hand and taking on more without that expectation. And I think this is something that it's not always a title change. It's not always more money. It's not always the glory. But if you keep taking on bits and pieces and more, then sooner or later, that's definitely realized, intellectually to the employer. But over time, when they've built this whole job for them. There's a need here, even if maybe it didn't exist or whatever. And that's not going to happen every time, but setting yourself up to, at the very least, you've gained a lot of skills that when you leave or go somewhere else, you prepared yourself to further your career, even if it's outside of that company. But more often than not, you find that the company is like, this person's kicking ass. We're gonna promote that and encourage that growth. So.
And if they don't, you can take it to another company, and all of a sudden you have this big resume and say,
Yeah.
listen, look at all I've done. You want me.
Yeah.
I can't really add a ton to that. Well said, you all. When you do get that first job, you'll probably notice, that you may be more well prepared than some of your other colleagues just due to Center's great educational background. But stay humble and put the time in, results will show. So, yeah, well said, you all.
Well, I'm not sure what the students, if they're seniors or juniors, how many we have on here, but if the students have any questions right now, we can open it up to them to kind of ask, whatever concerns you guys have right now, you can voice them and ask our alumni. And
I have a quick question.
You can unmute yourself, or we have a chat as well, whichever one you prefer.
I have a question regarding just selling the experience. A lot of the alumni have talked about taking a maybe a position they didn't want, or a position that wasn't necessarily in their industry. And I was just wondering how you guys were able to market or sell those experiences on your resumes in order to make the jump to the next step, because it looks like I'm going to be in a similar position where I'm taking a job that might not be where I want to be, but it's honestly not even in the same field. And I'm just nervous that by starting off in a kind of tangential or unconnected position, how am I going to be able to get where I want to go when I'm starting in an unconnected field?
I think you take a step back. It's a hard thing to learn. It's a hard thing to do. And I will say I learned a lot from reading a book by Carla Harris, and I'll look up the book title later and send it around, but on how to sell your story. And you take a step back and you look at the core competencies of what you're doing. So a lot of time you're in the weeds on things in a really specific job. But then you look back and say, actually, all I was doing is managing a process. And there's a lot of details behind that, but you receive strategic vision to do something, or you set a strategic vision to do something complicated, you break it apart into multiple steps, and then you implement it. And that is a core competency that you can then apply to another job. So it's learning how to take a step back, removing all of the really specific details around what you were doing, and then learning how to apply it to that new company story. The other piece that I think people miss a lot is you have to look at the company that you're the next company that you interview for, find out about their culture, find out about their vision, find out about what they're passionate about. And if it matches with what you feel, you can't sell something that you don't feel, and you can't sell something that's not a good match. But find out how to frame what you did before in line with their vision, with their culture, their values. Because if you hit that, right now, that's almost more important, in at least the field that I am in, than your core competencies. If you're not passionate about what they do, we're not going to hire you. I know that for a fact in my company. If you can't show me that you're passionate about what we do, I can't hire you, even if you have the best skill set in the world. So it's those two things. It's taking a step back, looking at the core competencies of what it is, and framing it in a way that's consistent with how the new company looks at the world.
Well said.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think Katie had a question. She said, how has your center education and school name carried throughout your career?
I mean, I think for me, echoing some comments earlier said, it is kind of a golden pass in the state of Kentucky. It seems a lot of familiarity there, maybe even Tennessee as well. But I don't know. I just feel like from a marketing standpoint, employers and people in Kentucky and nearby, they just get it. I mean, the students that come out, I mean, I feel like they're prepared for career life quickly, would be my take on that.
Yeah, and I think that even in having had jobs where the person across the table interviewing me was familiar with center and had that thing, oh, that's automatically put on the positive column. I've also sat across and had jobs where the employer had no idea where it was and it meant nothing. So you get a little bit of perspective of both of that. I think if you take it back to what did you gain from your experience at center, that's universal to anyone. And as long as you're able to present that, I mean, you're no stranger to hard work if you go to center, because if you can make it through there and through the academic rigor that you're put through, I think that speaks volumes. And then, at least for me, one of the things at center was you're not afraid of a challenge just because you have a task that maybe you think, I'm not an expert at this. I'm not what. You're willing to say, I'm going to put in the time, I'm going to put in the research, I'm going to figure it out. Whether it's a job that says, hey, I know this is short notice, but can you go to X city tomorrow because you studied abroad and you figured out transportation. It's kind of one of those things where I didn't, because most everyone I was around at center had those same experiences. That's not a skill set everyone's willing to do, to be able to just hop up and just feel comfortable going off on the unknown. But I think center prepares most of its students to be able to say yes. And I think that's another skill that, to Andrew's point earlier, if you pull back and you're not looking at the detail of your specific job, that skill set of being the willing person to go down the rabbit hole of whatever task at hand, and nail it because you're perfectionists. Center produces a lot of those. I think that's a highly universal skill, whether it's center or not. Because like Derek said, some people know it, and as Andrew pointed out, some people don't at all, and it doesn't matter. But if you can focus in on what you gained from the experience at center, I think then that's a universal thing.
Yeah, if y'all can just get a job, you're going to shine. I think that is, just get in there somewhere and it'll work.
Shannon, what's been your experience?
Oh, sorry.
I was asking what your experience was, Shannon.
Yeah, like the connections, there aren't that many alums in the Chicago. It's growing, but we're still kind of spread out in lots of different, and so I don't have those benefits that might be in the Kentucky area. But I would say, echoing everything that Roy and Derek just said, it's really the preparedness that we've gained from our education. I definitely believed whenever I started law school and looking around at my classmates, and a lot of them struggled with a more rigorous, analytical subject matters that they hadn't been exposed to. They hadn't been in classes where they were being cold called by professors, or where they were being expected to have large discussions about material in depth. But I've been doing that for years, so it wasn't, the fear that you could see in other people's eyes wasn't there, and the ability to sit down and take a 4-hour exam that was very complicated subject matters. We'd been doing that, and so I was very prepared from the academic standpoint. But I would completely, it really is just getting your foot in the door. And once you get in somewhere, work every single day. Never stop working. And it's, the same. If you go to grad school or professional school, from day one, you are competing against everyone else sitting in that room with you. You need to make sure that you do everything you can to be at the top of your class, to excel, to take advantage of every opportunity the program gives, whether it's their internships or, you know, the resume builders that you need. You know, take every advantage, make sure that you're focused, you know, even going to graduate school, law school, or graduate school, you know, your objective is always the same. It's to get a job at the end of the day. And, you know, unfortunately, even in 2008, I think I had a lot of classmates who looked at law school just as a continuation of undergrad in some respect. And hey, let's still go out to the bars every, you know, Friday and Saturday night. Not saying that didn't happen from my perspective either, but, you know, you'd certainly, you know, your focus from day one is, where am I getting in my career? How is what I'm doing building? Am I presenting myself in the best way possible? Am I creating a reputation for myself as a professional that I will then be able to build on for the next 20, 30, 40 years?
For me, I'm based in the DC area, and Shannon, it sounds like it was the same for you. But when you're in metropolitan areas that have never heard of Center, the Center College education can be a double-edged sword, and you have to learn how to wield it. Because Derek, I really like what you said earlier about you got to stay humble, and there's nothing more humbling than going into an interview and being very proud of your background and having somebody look at you blankly, and then, what is that? I've never heard of that. And you can see the look in their eyes go like, I really don't care. And in fact, it becomes a liability for you because it has, outside of Kentucky and Tennessee, it doesn't have a lot of name recognition. And without the name recognition, rightly or wrongly, it gets like, oh, it must not be a very good school. And so it actually can lower people's expectations, and it can be a liability whenever you're first going out. But if you learn how to wield it and to be confident that you do have the skills that you need, and even though other people don't recognize it, they've never heard of it, if you follow through, just like Roy Lee and Derek were saying, if you follow through on those underlying skills that you've learned, and like Shannon was saying, to have the confidence that you know what you're doing and you know how to be prepared and you know how to do good work, then Center follows you. And so I've worked at 4 companies. On 2 of them, I've had board members with Kentucky connections. And I have gotten so much street cred from those board members who then say, wait, you went to Center? Oh, and then they talk you up at they both times have talked me up to their CEOs of the company saying, oh, one of them literally in a staff meeting said, oh, that's the Harvard of the South. And I was like, yes, from a board member. And actually this fall, my vice chair of my board is based in Berea, and he's walking through our office. We had an office open house. We just moved there. And I have my Center diploma on my wall. And I'd met him before, chatted with him. He's a client of mine, but never had said, hey, I went to Center, because there's humility, and it does go a long way. And you can't just go up to someone and say, hey, I went to Center on the bee's knees.
Time to hire me, baby. Center College.
Right. That's right. But he walked past my office with my CEO. And he said, wait, somebody went to Center. And so she introduced me thinking it was the Kentucky connection. And then he said, well, why aren't you working for me? Anytime you want a job, you can come and buy. So my vice chair of my board offered me a job on the spot in front of my CEO. So it was this wonderful, glorious moment, but it was also, it follows you around. And so learning how to wield the double-edged sword, which is, listen, I know you've never heard of my educational background, but I know what I'm doing. I have this experience. You come and you nail it, just like Roy Lee said. And then all of a sudden, somebody out of left field says, oh, they went to Center. It's a pretty good school. It can really support you. So you go in and it kind of lowers expectations, which, Derek, like you said, life is about managing expectations.
I can't hear you.
I pressed unmute and it wouldn't unmute me.
Did Andrea cut out?
Did Andrea cut out?
I couldn't hear the rest of that.
Okay.
Yeah, so the one thing that I would add, just echoing Andrea,
Yeah, go ahead.
everybody else, you know, I agree it can be a double-edged sword when people don't know or recognize your undergrad. And so I think it is helpful to have kind of that 30-second elevator pitch prepared to explain explain without, being boisterous or, too over the top about your explanation. But you want to make sure that you're if people who haven't heard of Center about the type of school and program that you and whatever, if there's something particular about what your major or your experience was that you can throw in there as part of the pitch, it is helpful to have that prepared, because you're selling not only yourself, but you're selling your experiences and your background. And for someone who doesn't know what the center education means, you have to educate them on that as well.
Yeah.
Maybe if you're interviewing out of state, it'd be a good idea behind your resume page to put the tuition page for Center. So let people know what's happening up front, that may help.
As someone, when you're sitting on the other side of interviews, I would just think about kind of unique and creative ways of answering certain questions that would allow you to talk about your center experience and what that means. And it's going to communicate a message. One of the questions I often ask people is, tell me about your favorite class you've taken in college and why. And if you think about how can you convey not only the answer to the question, but, Center is a very rigorous, high expectation, high achieving institution. Tie that into an answer that, maybe wasn't the direct question, but it leaves them, and maybe they're curious, maybe they Google it, maybe they ask somebody or whatever it may be. But I think there's ways that you can kind of communicate that throughout an interview, even if you're not specifically asked for your little elevator spiel, which we all have. We've all done it. So definitely have that ready too. Tell me what is Center?
That's a good point.
Agreed.
So, a couple more questions in the chat. Roy Lucas Mazingo, I think you guys should be able to see this. He is wanting to know if he can get your contact information. He says that he is interested in your industry. He'd love to chat time.
Can you just send it on to him?
Sounds good. Yeah, if everybody's okay with me giving their contact information, I can send to the students who attended today. Okay. Cool. So our next question is from Maggie. She says she's going into elementary education and she's just wondering if you have any advice entering into the field through friends you have who are teachers or your own experiences with kids. I don't know if anybody's got
Not going to be much help on that one.
connection to the education.
Yeah.
I think that one's going to be tough right now just because the virtual nature of education right now, that's a mess, and it can only be a mess. So if you have friends in the field, ask for a reference and be aggressive in pursuing jobs.
Yeah. And I will say, working with the CCPD, Maggie, definitely come to the CCPD. We have resources where we can maybe find alums who are in the education field or your alumni office. We can try and help make those connections for you.
I would say I obviously personally do not have any experience, but one of my sisters is a school psychologist and has worked primarily in Frankfurt and counties in her career. And I know early on as a young professional trying to get into a school district, particularly in a school district where she didn't grow up and didn't have connections, it was very important for her to kind of go back to that, just get your foot in the door and get the experience that she ended up having to take positions at schools or in, even counties that wouldn't have been her first, second or third or fourth choice, just to get in and start getting that experience. And then eventually, she was able to leverage relationships that she'd made along the way to keep moving in to now where she'd like to be. But it took her, 15 years of her career to get to that point.
Right. So we have another question from Pearl. She says, hello, I'm a junior and she's interested in applying for law school. So this question is for Shannon, but anyone can answer, she says. She says, do you think applying to professional schools such as law school during this pandemic will put me at a greater or lesser advantage in getting in, especially because my summer internship has been halted?
Yeah, I think it depends on, it's hard to see where the market, how long it's going to take for the recovery. I do, my firm, thankfully right now, we're in a position where we have clients who are all still in business and still, able to pay and keep us going. But there certainly is a shrinkage happening in the industry right now. And it could also be different in different parts of the country. In Metro Chicago, we're seeing the big firms in particular are canceling summer classes, are letting young associates go, are instituting salary cuts all the way up and down the chain, from salaried admin positions all the way up to executives. So we're already seeing a lot of ramifications. You have to think about all the businesses and the different industries that are contracting right now. Those are the people that come to lawyers, especially in the area that I work in business law. If you were in criminal or family or areas that things keep happening and you're going, or if you're in states, people will keep needing those types of things. If you're thinking more corporate or intellectual property, those are areas where you might have shifts in the next few years. With law school, most programs are 3, possibly 4 years. And so it's hard to say where the market will be in a couple of years. For anyone who is looking to apply to law in particular, I would just really recommend, before taking that step, to really look at the schools that you're able to get into. Try to focus and make sure that you're positioning yourself to get into the most rigorous academic program you can, but also being mindful of student loans and with the uncertainty of the market, you don't want to graduate with hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt that you're laden. I had a lot of classmates who that happened to when we graduated, who were either unemployed or underemployed for years afterwards and have really struggled trying to pay back student loans. So it's really a balance of looking at it and saying, what schools, certainly, apply to the schools that you're interested in and see, but be willing to have some flexibility in the next year with final decisions. It might be that you go work for a year and then apply again instead. If the schools or if the scholarships available, aren't as good as they might be later, it might just not be the right time to do it.
This is taking away from law school and just professional school more generally. I remember advice that I was giving as a senior, which was go to a company and have them pay for your school. And I remember scoffing at it at the time, like, no one's going to pay for me to go to school, because I was thinking, oh, somebody will give me a full tuition. That is unlikely. But if you can get a job at a company that does have some type of tuition reimbursement, is extremely helpful for the student debt side, because and you're not always able to do this with law school, of course, because it's full-time. But if you, like, I went to a school where all my classes were in the evening. And so I was able to work full-time, be drawing a salary, and be able to pay for my living expenses, and then just take debt on for tuition. And if I could have made the whole deal even sweeter, it would have been to go to a company that would have paid for a portion of that tuition. It's not going to be a full ride. You're not going to most likely get away debt-free, but any bit helps, and having the income coming in is tremendously helpful. The other piece I would say is, if you are looking and if you are committed to going to grad school of some kind, go to the biggest, baddest school that you can get into. Go to Harvard, go to Yale, go to the biggest, baddest, scariest looking thing, because then that's going to land on your resume. And when a resume lands with a really big name behind it, like center resumes land with a really heavy weight in Kentucky and Tennessee, they don't land with a very lightweight in DC. Similarly, if you go, the biggest, baddest, scariest looking things are going to land heavy. And if the tuition is still too much, see if there's a workaround. Like if you're interested in getting an MBA for finance, but the cost benefit analysis isn't working out for you versus the value of the MBA versus the tuition and the debt you take on, consider doing a certification like a CFA, because that's $1,000 a year versus $70,000 a year. And it's big and bad and scary looking too.
I think those are great points, considering whether to leverage yourself heavily or not immediately getting out of center. It's a major consideration there. And on the other end, I mean, this COVID-19 situation, I mean, I'm personally expecting more of a V-shaped recovery, and I hope that's the case. Seems like the equities markets are reflecting that a little bit, but it could work into your benefit. I mean, you may go to law school or even what other professional school and kind of weather this storm. And then in a year or two, when you are looking to enter the market, maybe things are better. It's uncertain for sure, but I think Shannon and Andrea, great points about, I mean, behind it all is looking at the numbers too, and what's that going to look like for you personally when you're starting to look at, paying things off.
Oh, don't be afraid of debt either, though. When I was deciding on what to do after college, I had a professor who told me debt's a part of life, and you can't be scared off of something just because it's expensive. Yeah, I'm still paying my student debt. It's 10 years later. I've refinanced it a couple of times, but
I'll be
I'm still.
We're possibly paying college for our child consecutive at the same time. So not saying not saying to be afraid and only do something if you can have a free ride. There can be some very large price tags attached. So just look at it.
I'm hearing Shannon say there's a balance and find that happy medium and find what works for you, and everybody's different. But don't be afraid of it just because there's debt attached. I'm true to myself. I'm a credit analyst at heart, and the debt attached to it was really scary. I took the risk anyway, and I'm very happy I did.
Thank you.
It took me 10 years to pay off Center, and on my office wall is my last loan payment letter, literally framed on the wall. Everybody's different, like you say, Andrea, but I think thinking about it is most certainly important for sure.
So we have a couple more questions now. Katie asked, how did you make the most of the center experience? And would you tell us students to do anything differently?
I mean, I did a bunch of stuff. I was an RA, RD, played on the golf team, fraternity member, probably a little overbooked to be honest, but just tried to jump in and have fun too.
Have fun.
Yeah. And I think to Derek's point of like, we all at the time probably thought we were super overbooked. That doesn't change in normal life for most of us. It stays the same because it's how you're built, I think. But it also that's life. I mean, it's work-life balance. It's, anything from trying to mow the lawn to whatever. You got to find time. Center groundskeeping team doesn't just show up at your house and take care of it all anymore.
All right. Well, we have about 10 minutes left. Do you guys have any last remarks? I think some students had to hop off for class, but we still got 3 more on. Do you have any last minute remarks for them?
If somebody says whatever you need, give me a call. Take them up on it, because that's a scary part too. Clearly, I was really intimidated by the networking, and it's something that I had to really get out of my comfort zone to do. But if somebody offers, take them up on it. I can't tell you how many times I've told somebody, hey, whatever you need, give me a call, reach out, and they don't. I mean, it's like maybe 2 to 3% of people do. Take people up on their offers because they mean them.
Just stay positive throughout my employee reviews. That's one thing that's kind of been like a little bonus thing, is like, this guy's generally nice in the office or whatever, just try to be a light where you can. It may matter, I mean, if you get into that comparison situation that was referenced earlier, if you're someone that's, just generally okay to be around, I think that matters too. It's tough to quantify that exactly, but yeah, stay positive, have fun, and you'll figure it out. You will.
To echo that, I think you got to know your work environment and know your colleagues and the people you work with. But we had a particularly tough week a couple of weeks back. We had a colleague who lost a family member to COVID-19, and just needing to kind of have some positivity and whatnot. And I joined a video chat conference called Dressed as Joe Exotic. So you just have those, moments where you just provide that bit of light. And that means as much, I think, to your work relationships and the culture that you can create. Something my dad had always said, like, if you enjoy what you do, don't work a day in your life. it's very easily said until you actually think about what that means to your day to day. It means a lot. So I'm lucky, I've had a job I couldn't, the pit of your stomach churned every time I got a phone call. And now I have a job I love, and they're night and day as far as how it impacts your life. So through this, try to find the light in what all you can, even if it's a ridiculous Netflix documentary.
Awesome.
And Katie had another quick question. Andrea, she said, whatever you need seems vague to me. What are examples of help what are some examples should they reach out for? Whenever professionals say, what do you need?
Yeah, when professionals say whatever you need, it's a blank check. So if you're in a work environment where you don't feel like you feel like it can be anywhere from, I really don't know how to complete this performance evaluation. What should I be putting here? Because it seems important, but I don't know what I'm doing. To help me understand this corporate culture, to, hey, I'm taking a job and I'm really excited to be here and I'm really dedicated to it, but I also want to be able to grow professionally. I want to get to point B. Can you help me figure out how to get to point B? And sit down and map that out. So it's a blank check. And if they say no, which they probably won't because they offered, then they can help point you in the right direction. It's also how you start to develop a mentor relationship and a sponsor relationship internally, which is really awkward. And so if you just take the word mentor and sponsor out of it and you just develop a relationship by saying, hey, to Sheena's point, can we grab a cup of coffee? Just 10 minutes. I'd really love to catch up with you, because it's just developing a relationship.
Yeah. The last thing that I would add to that, since it looks like our students that are left are female students, is a lot of industries are hard for women and even harder for young women. It's sadly something that I hope you don't experience, but you most likely will. To the extent that you can find women in your field in particular to, saddle up to and to try to build a mentor relationship, even if it's not someone in your office, but someone, that you've met along the way that you can look to try to help you to navigate. Because unfortunately there are a lot of additional roadblocks and maneuvering that you're going to have to go through as a young woman. And so I would highly recommend, I had great mentors along the way, and I try to give back to young women in particular, knowing how hard it can be, especially in some industries. So don't be afraid to take advantage of those relationships.
100% agree. You will run into issues. It's just baked into culture.
All right. Well, if anybody has any last minute remarks, or if you have any other questions they'd like to ask, we have about 5 more minutes. If not, I just want to thank you guys so much. This has been wonderful. And I don't know if you all can see, you guys should be able to see in the chat, but they've left some really, really great comments, and thanking you all so much. You've really made a difference today with these students. And we've recorded this, so it's going to be on our YouTube. So if anybody, I can send the link to that if you all want to share, if you all know any other younger alumni, anybody else who really needs some advice, this will be posted on our YouTube. But thank you guys so much. This has been really wonderful. We really
Good luck. Y'all are going to do great.
Yeah. Good luck to everyone.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Well, I hope everybody stays safe and healthy throughout all this craziness. All right.
See you all.
Bye.
All right.
Thank you.